What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Let's get to working on this Humvee. Now, next steps with this, I will be trying to figure out a way to mount up the fuel tank to the frame. Originally it was mounted up to the body, but I don't really want to deal with routing all the lines and everything once the body's on, so I would like to get this mounted into the frame to where if I ever need to drop it out, I don't really have to worry about the body anymore. I do have a lift pump that's going to go in front of that, and that will supply a positive pressure to the mechanical pump of the engine. Now, also, whenever I have this turbo off, I'm going to look at the mechanical pump because it seems like I might have a slight leak in one of the hoses up there. I believe I know where the leak is, and I'm hoping it's just a hose clamp that I can just switch out and tighten back up. So since I wanted to go ahead and start with the fuel system next on this, I went ahead and brought the fuel tank in here, and I also unbolted the top plate just to see what type of fuel sending unit it had and the pickup tubes. Now, with the new engine and how it is tuned and how much fuel it's going to need, this small pickup unit and return line here actually are not going to do, so I am going to have to get a larger size to put in here for both of those. I'm hoping to keep the fuel level sending unit the same and just keep it original, and hopefully the signal that it sends off I'll be able to read up at the gauge still. Now, the original plan was to actually try to find a way to mount this fuel tank up to the frame instead of hanging it from the body like it originally was. After doing a little fitment here and actually trying to figure out how I could do this, it seems like the best option and easiest option is actually going to be to just reuse the body hanging mounts and just modify them because of the lift. Now, with this swap, I do end up having to do a 3-inch lift, and we have these 3-inch body lift spacers here. You're going to need to keep the fuel tank relatively where it was originally. I don't know how well it comes across on the video, but the inside part of the fuel tank is concave to go around the drive shaft from the transfer case to the back diff there. So really that is going to limit us from being able to move this gas tank up or down on the frame here. So the plan is going to be to just modify the original fuel tank straps with a 3-inch section because of the 3-inch lift, and then also put a 3-inch block here as well, because this is where a little cross member is on the body, and it snugs up against this portion of the fuel tank. Now, I went ahead and kind of slid this in place just to see how it fits with the transfer case. And I don't know if you can tell, but there is a little tab along that side of the transfer case that's actually rubbing on this metal cover on this gas tank. So I'm going to drop this back out of here and have to shave that down a little bit just to make some clearance. Now, it's really not going to affect the transfer case. It is more like one of these types of tabs here. They actually don't have much of a purpose in the structural portion of the transfer case. This side here, I am hoping to actually kind of drill and tap for some hangers for the exhaust whenever we get to that stage. So those will stay on. I'm just going to try to shave off just a little bit on that side in order to just make some clearance for this gas tank. These are the fuel tank straps and hangers off of the Humvee. Whenever I removed the fuel tank, I went ahead and kind of cleaned these up a little bit. They definitely need cleaned up more than they are now, but just so y'all get the idea of what I'm going to do with these, because we're doing the 3-inch lift, I need to actually extend these 3 inches. Now, ones like this, where it actually bolts to another portion, those I can either extend with a kind of just an extension that bolts and then bolts to the next one, or I may do like I'm going to do with this one. This one I'm going to have to actually cut in the middle and piece in another section of steel. Luckily, I have a piece here that's the correct thickness to do so. I think I'm actually going to start with the hanger type first and then figure out how well that does. If it is just easy to go ahead and slice in 3 inches into that, I'll just go ahead and do that on all of the hanger types. So on these hangers, there's actually a cross brace on the body of the Humvee where these basically slide up into it and then rotate to lock in place. On the strap portion, they actually fit in there and basically just hang up like that, and this is basically upside down, but you get the hint. So I'm going to get to working on slicing in about 3 more inches of steel in each of these. I'm actually going to try to do this with the TIG welder, and I am very new at TIG welding, but I'm hoping it goes all right. I've done some MIG welding, but I'd like to get better with TIG. So this is a good practice for it. We'll see how it turns out. So I got a little scrap piece of the same metal that I'm going to weld into these. I'm going to try a practice weld on it just to see what amperage I need these at so I don't mess up the first weld. If I do mess it up, at least it's on a scrap piece. Alright, we got those all welded up, and like I was saying, these aren't the prettiest welds, but they will definitely hold for what I need. Plus it gave me some practice just doing these little pieces. Alright, so today we're going to work on getting this fast system installed on the frame and plumbed up as best as we can right now until we get the suction tube mailed into us, and then I'll get to connecting that as well. I am going to have to modify the mounts just a little bit. The mount that connects directly to the pump itself, I shouldn't really have to mess with. Basically the bracket here, that the original way that it connects to the truck, I'm going to have to modify a little bit just because this is not going to work for my application. But the installation for basically everything else is going to be about the same. I'm going to have to also figure out how this connects into my standalone harness. I don't think it'll be too hard, but we'll get to that once I get this pump mounted up on the frame. So I think the best location for my application here is going to be actually next to the transmission here, and figuring out a way of mounting this to the frame at this location. I'm going to have to mount it up kind of high as well, because whenever I get done with this body lift and stuff as well, I don't want these filters to be sticking below that frame. Shouldn't get into any trouble with the body because the transmission is that tall as well. So now I'm going to get to mounting the portion of the bracket that actually bolts to the pump itself, and then I'll figure out a way of getting it mounted to the frame in this location, and then we'll get to kind of plumbing it up. So I'm actually going to take the plastic that this originally came in and wrap it back around this bottom portion. I just really want to try to minimize any dirt or debris that tries to get up into the tubes on the bottom. So let's get to mounting this bracket up on here. This bracket should mount up like this, and those holes line up just right. These are spacers for these locations, and this will bolt directly to that. So let's get to it. Alright, we now have the mount all modified. I went ahead and made an L-type modification on it so it actually is braced on the inside as well. It sits on top of the frame and it is mounted pretty solid. This little washer type setup here actually, whenever bolted down, applies pressure outward as well. It just is kind of a security thing. It just applies a little bit more pressure and keeps it all solid mounted. So now that we have that mounted up, we're going to get the lift pump and mount that to this and check all our fitment again. So one thing I'm going to need to do before running the fuel lines from the lift pump is to go ahead and remove the factory fuel filter location on the side of the engine here. Now whenever I upgraded some of the things on this engine, I went ahead and put stainless steel braided lines in. I am going to keep the stainless steel braided line for the return to the fuel tank, but I'll probably just end up using the fuel line that came with the fast kit, just because all of the fittings are already here and I can get this done in one day without having to order a whole bunch of parts. So I went ahead and switched out the return line. I now have it just connected to the long hose there. I'll have to measure that up before I cut that. That way I actually have, I'm sure I have enough hose to get it to the tank. This section is the supply to the engine. Now what I'm wanting to do is to put a fitting in here that allows for the same kind of bleed valve that was on the original filter. That way if I ever need to, I can crack it open and bleed out any air. That is actually being shipped right now, so what I'm going to do instead is just go ahead and attach the fast line to the fast pump and run it up here and give me just some extra room basically, and whenever I get in that piece I'll be connecting it all up with the supply line there. Alright guys, we have all the lines to the lift pump ran. So I just have these lines in the back capped off for now. They will go to the new pickup tube whenever it comes in, and I'll modify that top plate to accept that. Both of those will go to the same pickup tube. It has a built-in return on it. I went ahead and wrapped some of the lines with some heat shielding just to try to keep some of the heat out of these lines as well. Especially kind of important up here around this exhaust manifold as well. The return line from the engine I actually still have just sitting over here as well. It's capped off. It'll actually go to another return port in the top. I went ahead and put a wire loom mesh around this part of this hose just for a little abrasion resistance. It does sit pretty close to that transmission, and any vibrations may try to kind of cut into that hose over time. So I went ahead and put that on there as well, just for a little extra protection. And we'll also get this hooked up electronically as well whenever we get the rest of the harness hooked up into this engine harness. So that's going to do it for today, guys. It is near 115 degrees in that shop and a fan just isn't cutting it. Even my camera was trying to cut out on me a little bit there. So the rest of today I'm just going to be cleaning up a little bit and preparing for some of the next stuff to come on this project as well. I appreciate y'all watching, guys. If y'all like this type of content, please hit that like button. Share if you know somebody that might like it as well. And as always, I'll see y'all next time.